In next 15 minutes, I will help you learn about brain anatomy and its functions in detail. A cheetah runs much faster than Usain Bolt, the fastest man on the planet. Dogs' noses are 40 times stronger than ours. An eagle can see 5 times farther than a human. A gorilla is much stronger than 20 men combined. Humans can do a bit of everything with the help of a very usable body, but not as good as animals. Almost all the living creatures have brains in some shape and form. But what makes us superior? The difference is due to 1,400 grams of grey matter that weighs to a small-sized melon, the brain, the human brain. Animal brain is not as developed as humans, and it is the main advantage besides a universally usable body. Let's dive deep and explore the parts of the brain and their functions. The human brain looks like a large pinkish grey walnut. It is made up about 86 billion nerve cells, and it is estimated that 20% of our total energy budget goes towards running our brain. The brain is like a control center. It controls our automatic processes such as breathing, heart rate, and regulating our body temperature, as well as the more intentional processes including movement, speech, thinking, emotions, and our behavior. Given how complex our brain is, it is not surprising that each brain injury can be different. Damage to a specific brain region can impact the function or activity that is controlled by that brain region. It is also important to recognize that the brain is interconnected, so damage to one specific area may disrupt abilities mediated by another brain area due to the connections between these regions. The first vital part of the nervous system we will look at is the spinal cord. Without spinal cord, the brain is a very powerful computer without any input or output device attached to it. Although the computer is capable of performing very complex tasks, but in absence of input and output, it has no purpose. It is just a metal box. Spinal cord is the main information highway. All the information from parts of the body moves from and to the brain through the spinal cord. Spinal cord is protected by the vertebral bones that make up the backbone. The spinal cord is adjacent to and below the medulla, which is the lowest part of the brain. The top region of the spinal cord extends down from the medulla all the way to the lower back. Throughout the spinal cord, there is a consistent arrangement of nerves. The sensory nerve pathways are located toward the posterior, which is the back of the spinal cord, while the motor nerve pathways run along the lateral, which is the side, and anterior, which is the front region of the spinal cord. Let's look at the pathways. The primary role of the spinal cord is to relay sensory, motor, and autonomic messages between the brain and the rest of the body. Motor messages. The motor messages sent through the tract eventually reach the corresponding muscle, as the spinal nerve branches into smaller peripheral motor nerves that extends to the target muscle. Sensory messages. The spinal cord sends messages from our peripheral sensory nerve to our brain, allowing us to detect sensations that include light touch, vibration, pain, temperature, and the position of our body. The last one is autonomic messages. The spinal cord sends messages to regulate the internal organs of the body. This includes control of smooth muscles, such as the muscles that move our lungs, stomach, intestines, bladder, and uterus. As a matter of fact, every year around the world, between 250,000 and 500,000 people suffer a spinal cord injury. People with a spinal cord injury are 2 to 5 times more likely to die prematurely than the people without a spinal cord injury, with worse survival rates in low and middle income countries. The majority of spinal cord injuries are due to preventable causes, such as road traffic accidents, falls, violence, or sports injuries. Damage to spinal cord can affect our breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, bowel or bladder control, intimate life, muscles, bones, and joints. The first part of the brain we are going to look at is called brainstem. The brainstem is a collection of 3 areas of the brain. These parts are medulla, pons, and midbrain. The brainstem is located below the cerebellum and connects the brain to the spinal cord. It has the job of running all the involuntary muscles. These are the muscles we don't consciously control, such as the muscles which make our heart beat. Together, these three parts of the brain help keep us alive by controlling our breathing, digestion, and blood circulation. Let's look at the three individual parts. The first is medulla oblongata, also called medulla as a short, the lowest part of the brain and the lowest portion of the brain stem. It transfers nerve messages from the brain to the spinal cord. In addition to connecting sensory and motor messages, it is responsible for many vital involuntary functions, including regulating blood pressure, adjusting our heart function, pacing our rate of breathing, and coordinating our swallowing. The second part is called pons. It is a portion of the brainstem lying above the medulla oblongata and below the cerebellum. It works together with the medulla to serve an especially critical role in generating the respiratory rhythm of breathing. Active functioning of the pons may also be fundamental to rapid eye movement, which also called REM sleep. The third part is called midbrain. It's located below our cerebral cortex and at the topmost part of our brainstem. The midbrain serves important functions in motor movement, particularly movement of the eye and in auditory and visual processing. Damage to the brainstem can result in decreased capacity in breathing and ability to speech, swallowing food and water, difficulty with organization, perception of the environment, problems with balance and movement, dizziness and nausea, sleeping difficulties, locked-in syndrome, and unfortunate death. The next part of the brain we're going to look at is called cerebellum. Cerebellum coordinates movement and is involved in learned rote movements. It is responsible for motor control, also called motor memory. In Latin, cerebellum means little brain. It's a major structure of the hindbrain that is located near the brainstem. This part of the brain is responsible for coordinating voluntary movements. It is also responsible for a number of functions, including motor skills such as balance, coordination, and posture. Some of the mental functions, movement, motor learning, and vision. Damage to cerebellum can cause loss of ability to coordinate fine movements, loss of ability to walk, inability to reach and grab objects, tremors, dizziness, slurred speech, inability to make rapid movements. After cerebellum, the next part of the brain we're going to look at is called hypothalamus. The hypothalamus contains a control center for many functions of the autonomic nervous system, and it has effects on the endocrine system because of its complex interaction with the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus is the thermostat of the body. It regulates hunger and appetite, body temperature, mood, behavior, memory, sleep, intimate life, childbirth, thirst, heart rate, balance of salt and water in the body, and growth of the body. After hypothalamus, another important part of the brain is called pituitary gland. This tiny part of the brain is about the size of a pea and is also called master gland and hypophysis. This is a ductless gland of endocrine system that secretes hormones directly into the bloodstream. It is called master gland because its hormones regulate other important endocrine glands, including the adrenal, thyroid, and reproductive glands. It is located behind the bridge of the nose at the same level as eyes. Pituitary gland plays a major role in the growth and the regulation of the bodily function, including male and female hormones. It controls when and how fast we grow and also is at work during puberty. The pituitary gland also uses hormones to regulate blood pressure and water in the body. Any damage to pituitary gland can cause anxiety or depression, diabetes, hair loss, high blood pressure, irregular menstruation period, stunted growth or unusual growth spurts, unexpected breast milk production, low energy, loss of intimate life, unexplained weight gain or vision changes. Another important part of the brain is called amygdala. The name amygdala is derived from the Greek word amygdale, meaning almond, due to its almond-like shape. The amygdala is located in the middle of temporal lobe, in front of the hippocampus. Similar to the hippocampus, the amygdala is a paired structure, with one located in each hemisphere of the brain. The amygdala is part of the limbic system, a neural network that mediates many aspects of emotion and memory. Historically, the amygdala was considered to be involved primarily in fear and unpleasant stimuli emotions. After further research, it is also known to be involved in positive emotions or rewarding stimuli such as pleasure. Amygdala plays a prominent role in mediating many aspects of emotional learning and behavior. In addition to its involvement in the initiation of a fear response, the amygdala also seems to be very important in forming memories that are associated with fear-inducing events. Damage to amygdala can cause emotional sensitivity, fear, general anxiety disorder, depression, borderline personality disorder. Brain scans of borderline personality disorder patients showed unusual size and level of activity in amygdala. Next to amygdala, another part of the brain is called basal ganglia. Basal ganglia are a bunch of neurons that are located deep beneath the cerebral cortex. The basal ganglia specialize in processing information on movement and in fine-tuning the activity of brain circuits that determine the best possible response in a given situation. They play an important role in planning actions that are required to achieve a particular goal, in executing well-practiced habitual actions, and in learning new actions and situations. For example, using the hands to catch a ball or using the feet to run. Falling disorders are associated with basal ganglia. Schizophrenia, a serious mental illness that affects how a person thinks, feels, and behaves. The person may hear, smell, see, touch, or feel things that are not there at all. The second one is depression. Continuous low mood or sadness, feeling hopeless, helpless, anxious, and worried. Suicidal or self-harming thoughts. Feeling tearful, having no motivation or interest in things. The third one is obsessive compulsive disorder. As a short, we call it OCD. The symptoms are unwanted, intrusive, distressing thought. Image or urge enters the mind. Some of the repetitive behaviors, mental acts, feels driven to perform the action. The fourth one is Fahren's disease. The symptoms are involuntary, rapid, jerky movements, tremors, muscle rigidity, a mask-like facial appearance, or a shuffling gait. The fifth one is Parkinson's disease. Slow movement, stiff and inflexible muscles, tremors, depression, anxiety, or balance problems. And finally, Huntington's disease, which is difficulty concentrating, memory lapses, depression, stumbling and clumsiness, difficulty moving, swallowing, speaking and breathing, mood swings, and personality changes. Next to basal ganglia, the other part of the brain is called hippocampus. The term hippocampus is derived from the Greek word hippocampus. Hippo means horse and campus means sea monster, because the structure resembles the shape of a seahorse. The structure was first described by the anatomist Julius Caesar Aranzi because the hippocampus has been known of and observed for centuries. It is one of the most studied areas of the brain. Hippocampus located deep within the brain. The hippocampus works with the cerebral cortex to create memories. The hippocampus is responsible for helping us remember everything that happens in our life. The hippocampus also helps us remember how to navigate or move around our environment based on how we have moved around in the past. Studies of London cab drivers found that navigating of big city streets is linked to the growth of the rear region of the hippocampus. The hippocampus also plays a role in consolidating memories during sleep. Studies published in 2004 suggest that greater hippocampus activity during sleep following some sort of training or learning experience lead to better memory of the material the following day. It plays an important role in the limbic system. Damage to hippocampus can cause difficulty in remembering, difficulty in storing new memories, long-term memory problem, unable to identify objects, unable to recognize people, spatial disorientation linked to the onset of Alzheimer's disease. The part of the brain on top of hypothalamus is called thalamus. Thalamus sends sensory data to other parts of the brain. The thalamus looks like two paired bulbs consisting of mostly grey matter. Multiple nerve fibers connect the thalamus to the cerebral cortex. With all the activity going on in the brain, there needs to be the switching station, and this is the job of the thalamus. This part of the brain takes information coming from the body and it sends it on to the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex also sends messages to the thalamus, which then sends the information to other areas of the brain and spinal cord. It plays a crucial role in regulating consciousness and alertness. With the exception of the sense of smell, all of our sensory input is processed by the thalamus, including visual input coming from the retina, auditory information, pain, touch, and temperature. The thalamus is also connected to mood and motivation via the limbic system and plays a role in motor language function and cognition. Damage to thalamus can cause sensory issues such as tingling, numbness, or hypersensitivity, vision loss or light sensitivity, tremors, attention problems, memory loss, aphasia, insomnia, amnesia, impaired movement, impaired posture, chronic pain, sleepiness, loss of alertness and activation, impaired processing of sensory information, and apathy. Turn information to knowledge and knowledge to wisdom. Join me on the journey to seek enlightenment and vanquish ignorance. We just looked at 4 parts of the brain called hypothalamus, pituitary gland, amygdala, and hippocampus. These 4 parts of the brain make a system called limbic system, which we just mentioned. The next part of the brain we will discuss is called corpus callosum, a large bundle of more than 200 million fibers connecting the right side of the brain with the left side is the corpus callosum. This lets 2 sides of the brain talk to each other. Although it may seem a very simple function of connecting one side to the other, it is vital for both sides of the brain to coordinate with each other. It's like departments working independently without communication with each other can result in the failure of the organization. Damage to corpus callosum will disrupt the communication between both the hemispheres. It can cause slurred speech, difficulty swallowing, spasm in the vocal cord that cause changes in voice, rapid and exaggerated mood swings, lack of coordination and muscle spasm affect walking, picking up objects, speech, eye movement, swallowing, movement in both hands. Let's move on to the topmost part of the brain called cerebrum and cerebral hemispheres. The largest and uppermost portion of the brain. The cerebrum is divided into 2 halves, or cerebral hemispheres, and it accounts for 2/3 of the total weight of the brain. One hemisphere, usually the left, is functionally dominant, controlling language and speech. The other hemisphere interprets visual and spatial information. The cerebrum is responsible for processing sensory functions like vision, hearing, and touch, and it is involved in movement of our body. It is also the source of intellect and enables us to think, plan, read, hold memories, and process emotions, among many other tasks. So if someone has an injury involving only the left side of the brain, they may have difficulty speaking and moving their right arm and leg. The cerebral cortex, the wrinkled outer part of the brain, is the largest part of the brain. Its outer layer has large folds and creases of tissues that give the brain its characteristic wrinkly appearance. The cortex can be divided into 4 main areas or lobes. The first one is frontal lobe, is also called the boss of the brain. The parietal lobe is related to sensation. The occipital lobe, which is related to vision, and temporal lobe, which is related to memory. Frontal lobes. The frontal lobes are located directly behind the forehead and covers 41% of the cerebral cortex. The frontal lobes are the largest lobes in the human brain, and they are also the most common region of injury in the traumatic brain injury. The frontal lobes are important for voluntary movement, expressive language, and for managing high-level executive functions. Executive functions refer to a collection of cognitive skills, including the capacity to plan, organize, initiate, self-monitor, and control one's responses in order to achieve a goal. The frontal lobes are considered our behavior and emotional control center and home to our personality. There is no other part of the brain where lesions can cause such a wide variety of symptoms. The frontal lobes are the home of much of what makes us human. These play a role in everything from movement to intelligence, helps us anticipate the consequences of our actions, and aid in the planning of future actions. This part of the brain is the newest from an evolutionary perspective and is the last to develop, making the frontal lobe both highly flexible and vulnerable to developmental damage. Named for their location, the frontal lobes are situated toward the front of the cerebrum, just behind the forehead and under the frontal skull bones. Some of the many functions of the frontal lobe include: number 1, coordinating voluntary movement, such as walking and reaching for objects. The frontal lobe is home to the primary motor cortex, assessing future consequences of current action. Thus, the frontal lobe plays a role in impulse control, including decisions about where to spend money and what to eat, and whether a particular decision is morally or socially acceptable. Also, assessing similarities and difference between two objects. Number 2 is formation and retention of long-term memories, particularly emotional memory derived from the limbic system. The frontal lobe plays a role in understanding language, linguistic memories, and speaking. Number 3, emotional expression and regulation. In addition to understanding the emotions of others, empathy may derive from the frontal lobe. Number 4, the development of personality. Because of the frontal lobe's role in memory, emotional regulation, expression, impulse control, and other key functions, it plays a key role in personality. Damage to the frontal lobe can spur sudden and immediate alterations in personality. Number 5, managing reward. Dopamine, a neurotransmitter that plays a role in reward and motivation, is heavily active in the frontal lobe because most of the brain's dopamine sensitive neurons located in the frontal lobe. Number 6, attention regulation, including selective attention. Frontal lobe difficulties can lead to executive function issues as well as disorders such as ADHD. To sum up, the functions are personality, behavior, emotions, judgment, planning, problem solving. It also plays a role in speech, speaking and writing, body movement, intelligence, concentration, and self-awareness. Damage to the frontal lobe can cause loss of simple movement of various body parts, inability to plan a sequence of complex movements needed to complete multi-step tasks, such as making a coffee. Loss of spontaneity in interaction with others, inability to express language, loss of flexibility in thinking and persistence of a single idea or behavior, inability to focus on a task and to filter out distractions, mood fluctuations, difficulty problem solving, difficulty inhibiting or controlling a response or impulse, reduced motivation, initiation and persistence on activities, reduced awareness, insights into difficulties, changes in social behavior, changes in personality. The parietal lobes are located behind the frontal lobe and above occipital lobe. The parietal lobes are located near the back and top of the head and occupy 19% of the cerebral cortex, slightly bigger than occipital lobes. These are important for processing and interpreting somatosensory input. For example, these inform us about objects in our external environment through touch, that is physical touch with skin, and about the position and movement of our body parts. The parietal lobes are also responsible for integrating sensory input and construction of a spatial coordinate system to represent the world around us. Interprets language and words, sense of touch, pain and temperature, interprets signals from vision, hearing, motor, sensory and memory, spatial and visual perception. The key functions are the parietal lobe are a major interpreter of the sensory world around the body. In fact, the parietal lobes are primary sensory area, which means that it is the starting point of sensory processing within the brain. The sense of sight, taste, hearing, smell, touch, speech, writing, and temperature. Damage to the parietal lobe can result in difficulty with drawing objects, difficulty in distinguishing from left to right, spatial disorientation and navigation difficulties, problem with reading, inability to locate words for writing, difficulty with doing mathematics, lack of awareness of certain body parts or surrounding space, inability to focus visual attention, difficulty with motor planning and complex movement. Occipital lobes. The occipital lobes are one of the 4 lobes pairs in the human brain. The occipital lobes rest below the occipital bone of the skull. These are also the smallest of the lobes. They cover only 18% of the cerebral cortex and they look like a triangle. The occipital lobes sit at the back of the head and are responsible for visual perception, including color, form, and motion. The key functions are distance, depth perception, color determination, object recognition, movement, face recognition. The damage to the occipital lobe can include difficulty with locating objects in environment, difficulty with identifying colors, production of hallucinations, visual illusions, inaccurately seeing objects, word blindness, inability to recognize words, difficulty in recognizing drawn objects, inability to recognize the movement of an object, difficulties with reading and writing. Temporal lobes. The temporal lobes sit behind the ears and are the second largest lobes. These occupy 22% of the cerebral cortex. They are most commonly associated with processing of auditory information and with the encoding of memory. The temporal lobes are also believed to play an important role in the processing of emotions, language, and certain aspects of visual perception. The dominant temporal lobe, which is the left side in most people, is involved in understanding language and learning and remembering of verbal information. The non-dominant lobe, which is typically the right temporal lobe, is involved in learning and remembering non-verbal information. The key functions are understanding language, memory, hearing, sequencing, and organization. Damage to the temporal lobe can cause difficulty in understanding spoken words, disturbance with selective attention to what we see and hear, difficulty with identification and categorization of objects, difficulty learning and retaining new information, impaired factual and long-term memory, persistent talking, difficulty in recognizing faces, increased or decreased interest in sexual behavior, emotional disturbances. There are 2 areas of the brain that are worth mentioning here. The first one is called Broca's area. It's a region of the brain that contains neurons involved in speech function. This area, located in the frontal part of the left hemisphere of the brain, was discovered in 1861 by French surgeon called Broca, who found that it serves a vital role in the generation of articulate speech. The other part of the brain is called Wernicke's area. It's a region of the brain that contains motor neurons involved in the comprehension of speech. This area was first described in 1874 by German neurologist Karl Wernicke. It lies close to the auditory cortex. This area appears to be uniquely important for the comprehension of speech sounds and is considered to be the receptive language or language comprehension center. The damage to these areas are called aphasia. Broca's aphasia results in struggling to express oneself. The person wants to say something but struggles to find the words to complete the sentence. For example, I fruit. They probably want to say the word eat or like, but it is missing from the sentence. Or the second example, weather is. Possible missing word can be cold, hot, pleasant, or nice. But the person is unable to complete the sentence with an appropriate word. This is called Broca's aphasia. Now we look at Wernicke's aphasia. It causes difficulty understanding the language. The person is able to speak, but the words don't make sense. For example, eat, fruitosh-like. The person is possibly trying to say, I like to eat fruit. The sentence doesn't make sense because the words are not in order and some of the words are distorted. As another example, weather niche. This sentence makes some sense to the listener who knows the person but difficult to understand for others. Rather than saying weather is nice, the words are not in order and also distorted. NeoCortex, the phylogenetically most recent part of the cerebral cortex. The neocortex has 6 horizontal layers. The more ancient part of the cerebral cortex, the hippocampus, has at most 3 cellular layers. Neurons in various layers connect vertically to form small microcircuits called columns. The neocortex is the newest part of the cerebral cortex to evolve. The 6 layers neocortex is a distinguishing feature of mammals. It has been found in the brains of all mammals, but not in any other animal. In humans, 90% of the cerebral cortex and 76% of the entire brain is neocortex. The neocortex is the largest and most powerful area of the human brain. All of its important cognitive functions are made possible by the convergence of 2 distinct streams of information. One, bottom-up stream, which represents signals from the environment, and second, top-down stream, which transmits internally generated information about past experiences and current aims.